Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Melissa Bear. I am the co-chair for the Sustainability Tech Subboard for NZ Tech. And we're here today to speak to Alexis from Intel around all of the sustainability initiatives that Intel's taking on. Which is really exciting. And in New Zealand, we're growing our technology sector. And so this sustainability journey is a super important one for us. Hopefully today, Alexis will share some of the wins, some of the challenges, and sort of light the road as to what's coming up and what we can learn from Intel and what their journey has been, which has been a long one. So, Alexis, over to you. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey with Intel and Intel's journey to kick it off?
Yeah, happy to. Melissa, thanks so much for having me. So my name's Alexis Crowell. I'm the CTO for Asia Pacific at Intel. And my team's responsible for the technology solutions. So we spend a lot of time in sustainability. We spend a lot of time helping other companies as well as ourselves kind of think through how do we have a smaller footprint on the environment? How do we help other companies think through their own footprint? And also, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about business, right? So how are we driving all of this from a business of the economy and the environment, as well as, how are we building products that are more sustainable long term? So I've been at the company for almost 2 decades.
I know, I saw that. That's insane.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's been a really fun run. Done lots of different things.
A lot of different things. So from sales and marketing to tech. Yeah.
To tech. Yeah, across the board. Started in finance of all places. This is the 6th country I've lived in with Intel. So it's been,
wow.
Yeah, it's just a really, really fun spot to be. And in terms of sustainability, we actually started this journey almost 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
1994 was the first time we voluntarily reported our environmental impact.
Amazing.
So way before sustainability was a word.
or cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Just before we kick into the sustainability stuff, I think it's really important that kind of just briefing what Intel, like, it's kind of even mind-blowing how much Intel really touches, like all of the things. Can you kind of just give a bit of a brief summary on, because there's the hardware element to it, the data center, just kind of for people who are, I'm sure people know the name, but probably don't know the iceberg of awesomeness that sits beneath the name. So if you kind of can touch across some of that kind of thing, so we can have a bit of context for sort of how much what you do touches.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking. So we believe our mission is to improve the lives of every human on Earth through technology. And the way that we do that started with chips, right? We started with memory chips and then silicon CPU chips, like kind of the heart of a computer, whether it's a laptop or it's a server or it's now at the edge. And that's now spanned. So now we are in cars, we're in, the electronics that you use in your home, we're in the big data centers that power your phones and get you all of the Google and the Microsoft Bing information that you need. And up through the software stack. So one of the things that we don't talk about a lot, but we actually play a really big role in the software ecosystem too, because that silicon doesn't work without the software. And unless you put them together in a really efficient way, then the system's not effective. So that's kind of like the holistic approach. And it sounds, huge and idealistic, but that's truly what we touch. And we think of ourselves as a technology leader, which means we try and bring the industry and we forge the ecosystem with us across all of these different spaces. So we tend to build a lot of consortiums and do a lot of standards just to try and make sure the whole industry goes together at the same time.
So I'm really excited about this because, and this is not about me, but my background's in agriculture, and I often say that agriculture touches every lived experience of every human being, right? And so what you guys do in kind of drawing the connections between those two things, because now when agriculture and technology are merging, it's like a super exciting moment in history. So so that's kind of where I get really excited about what technology can do and how you guys are playing and touching everything, all elements of our lives without us even really knowing. So just as a start, I think there was, everyone's obsessed with this kind of carbon stuff, right? So,
yes.
and I mean, I have my own kind of concepts around, if we get really like obsessively pigeonholed about it, could have detrimental consequences. But I know you guys have been on this journey for quite some time. So can you give me a bit of a timeline as to how did that start? What is that classic? How it started, how it's going, and sort of that journey of the mindset shift, the company shift, the focus, the spend, that kind of thing.
Yeah, man, we could talk about this all day. So like I said, 1994 was when we first started actually reporting this and trying to really track what we do. And I mean, we're an engineering company at heart, which means we track and measure everything. Um,
Nerds
and
galore.
if you look across, like, so our manufacturing footprint is huge, right? We've got factories, we've got a huge factory in Malaysia, we've got factories in Vietnam, in the US, and Israel, all over the world. And they've grown since, the 2000s because the industry's grown, the demand has grown, and our footprint has grown. But the really cool part about it is because we put such a focus on this, we've actually seen our absolute scope 1 and scope 2 emissions drop at 20+%
That's
since
amazing.
2000. I know it's super impressive. And really what it started with was some really passionate employees that said, hey, we can do this better.
Oh,
Right. And when you get those really passionate people looking at a business problem, it's amazing what they can come up with.
yeah.
Um, so it got so embedded in who we are as a company that in 2008, all of our bonus, not all, like all of our bonuses, right? Every employee in the company that's on our bonus plan, part of it is accounted for by how we're tracking towards these metrics and
Wow.
are we really moving the needle or not. So I made a compensation, right? And as soon as you start paying somebody, it's amazing how much more it can kick in.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. So
Of genius come alive when you start to pay people for certain things.
right. So you get the really passionate people that start the whole thing, and then you get the whole company involved in it, right? And finding new and interesting ways to move it forward. And then because, like I said, we're Intel and we try and move the whole industry at the same time.
Yeah.
We've worked with, consortiums and, the UN Global Index and, kind of across the board to figure out how do we do this better as an economy, right? As a whole technology economy, to include things like, what do you do with the chemicals, right? Because if you think about like manufacturing silicon, there's tons of chemicals involved, lots of raw materials, and putting all of that together requires a really thoughtful approach to what do you do with the byproduct, right? And what do you do with the waste of all of that? And I'm super proud to say that in 2020, the latest data that we've got it measured for 21. I just don't know what it is. Only 5% of all of our waste across our entire company went to a landfill. Because we started looking at like, okay, how do you build a circular economy? How do you work with suppliers and then other industry players to reuse some of some of those chemicals? So it's been really cool, right? Because you start to think differently, and when you put out really audacious goals that you don't actually know how you're going to get to, you have to start inventing things.
Yeah.
So in 2020, we committed to what we call RISE, which is our corporate sustainability, corporate social responsibility, our CSR goals, right? And it includes a number of different things, sustainability being that S, right? So it's RISE, S is the sustainability component. And in that, we said we'll be net carbon neutral by 2040, right, across everything that we do. We said that we were going to reduce our water consumption pretty dramatically and that we would go after renewable energy sources across our entirety of manufacturing facilities. And if you look across what we've done, we've got renewable energy that we're either helping produce and kind of create or capture rather at our factories. We've got solar grids across most of our factories. We use small wind turbines on some of our locations, heat capture, like all of the different ways that we've tried to test. They're now all associated. And I think we're at like 80% renewable energy.
It's amazing. It's extraordinary.
Entirety. So yeah.
So
long-winded way of saying like, yes, footprint is a really big deal to us. We continually try and reduce it. We've got a long ways to go. I think the whole industry does, but we've made some really good progress.
Well, and I think you guys are so big that making a sort of a big step and indent that you have has quite a compounding effect. Taking a step back, obviously you didn't start out excellent. You sort of started. Were you there in 1994?
I wasn't. No, I wasn't. I was still in school.
I was like, this is going to be but you came along sort of shortly after. You would have memories of early days of what this looks like, how you probably weren't always being paid and rewarded in bonuses. So what did that look like in early days around, what did you start to measure? Like, how did you start to tackle this? Because I'm mostly asking this question from maybe we have smaller, medium enterprises, and it's daunting to go, okay, I'm going to reduce all of my energy, or I don't even know if we do use renewable energy, right? So how do you start, I guess would be the kind of, or what was the thing that now that it's embedded, if you were to look back, how would you have started?
So I would again find those couple of passionate people. So that's what really helped
Yeah.
Intel. And that's been true across a number of really big shifts that we've made, whether it's our conflict-free minerals, whether it's the carbon footprint, whether it's water reduction. It's been a few really passionate employees that have wanted to go do something different and go do something better. Start there.
Yeah.
And then what we did was we started to formalize it a little bit. We actually built an office. It started out as corporate social responsibility, and they looked across everything. And then within the CSR office, they started to get more specific on different elements of it, right? Whether there's a whole philanthropic element to Intel and how are we giving back. There's obviously all of the sustainability and the social responsibility from that element. There's inclusion, there's a number of things that this office is now responsible for, but there's an arm very specific to how are we doing sustainability. And then what I would say is you've got to look at it from kind of two angles, right? There's the, what are you building? So from our perspective, we have a factory team that is really, really focused on this, right? They understand how the factory operations function, what's needed, how much water do you actually have to use? How clean does that water have to be? How clean is it when you're done? So what can you do with it when you're done with it? That type of thing. And then there's the product design side, which is, okay, what are we actually bringing through the factories? And those two teams now exist inside of Intel, right? Where you're working on the manufacturing side and how you build something, and then the what you build. And they work in concert, but they're actually two independent arms. Which we have found to be really beneficial because then the what you build also has scope 3 capability and it starts to influence what the whole supply chain looks like too. So
Yeah.
so that's where I would start. Start small.
Yeah.
Find
I was going to say,
those passionate people.
what's the first thing that you measured? Like, what was the thing that you first started to measure? Is there anything that you put metrics to, or?
Yeah, I think the first couple of things we measured were electricity and water. I mean, we use billions and billions of gallons of water a year. So being able to be more effective with the water that we're using has a huge impact, right? Not only to the local economies and the communities that we're a part of, but also to candidly our P&L, right? If you have to buy fresh water every single time, like that's just way too costly for anybody to absorb. So we started to do it in collaboration with the communities that we're a part of. And like in Oregon, where I was most recently, we've done a lot of water renewal projects, both within like watersheds that are locally recycling water back into their economy. In India, we're helping them utilize like our wastewater is cleaner water than most communities have access to for drinking.
Wow.
Right. So when you think about it from that mechanism, you're like, oh my gosh, think about the good that we could do. Right. Like that creates a whole new life for this water that really sustains other life. And to your point on agriculture, right? I mean, if it's cleaner than what people are drinking, it's a lot cleaner than what our food is being fed.
Absolutely.
Right? It becomes this really, really good virtuous cycle. So that's what we're trying to do. But I think it was water and energy that we met.
And that's a really good point, right? You go, we're a big water user. We should probably look at how we're measuring that, right? From a technology perspective, probably most of it would be how are our offices powered, right? Even just starting to look into that. And that's the sort of just getting curious, putting some numbers to it, beginning to capture some numbers is, I think, probably how we get started. I just wanted to say that it's often really quite almost serendipitous or synchronistic when the right thing is the right thing is the right thing for all the stakeholders, right? You talk about the communities, which I actually would love to get you to talk about that, because I think that's, while it's not climate responsibility necessarily in a real hard term, it still is a sustainability. And so we'll talk about that in a minute, but the kind of what's good for the planet, good for the environment, good for the P&L, good for the business, all starts to really work. You've hit a real good nugget when that's shaping up. So can you speak about, because I know there's a really good story that you have around the communities that you support and how you do that work in addition to all the climate stuff.
Yeah, so we fundamentally believe that we're members of society and members of the communities, right? If our mission is improve the lives of every human on Earth, that also means the people that live in and around what we do.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of stories, two that I'm super proud of from an Intel perspective. One, in about 2014, we committed to completely conflict-free minerals in our supply chain. And I mean, that took a ton of work because it was working with the, all of the different countries that where we source these minerals and making sure that they're doing it in a humanitarian and safe way, and the people that are involved are really protected. All the way through then our supply chain of making sure, like, as those minerals and those precious metals get to us,
Yeah.
everyone that's been a part of it is paid fair wages, and it's all,
Yeah.
kind of above board. So, like, that to me is amazing because that didn't have to happen. It's the right thing to do, to your earlier point, or right, how
Yeah.
to the right thing for the people, the right thing for the technology, but it didn't have to happen. And we had some
Mm.
really passionate employees that really rallied a lot of folks to go
Cool.
change, which is just awesome, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm so proud of the work that they did. I had nothing to do with it. Like, just be really clear, because I'm so proud to work in a company
Yeah,
that took
that's cool.
that on. And then from the water perspective, I mean, that plays in a bunch of different places. So I'll talk about India again, right? Not
Yeah.
only have we really helped them get some cleaner water into their agriculture, we've also brought in other technology like AI that's
Mhm.
helping them figure out how much water do they need to use, right? What's the moisture content of the soil? What's the nutrient content of that soil so they can
Super
increase
cool.
the yield safely for their
Wow.
citizens? I mean, that stuff
Nice.
is just like, that's not driving our P&L. That's the right thing to do for people,
Yeah.
and
Game changer.
that's just a
Yeah.
couple of examples that I'm super proud of.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that because I think, yeah, it's super important to be holistic around how we define or talk about sustainability because, again, single focus on carbon might have detrimental consequences. But if we look at the entire ecosystem holistically, it changes to kind of how we approach it. But frameworks. So there is a lot of frameworks. There's a lot of like certifications. There's a lot of sort of green tick marks that you could achieve. I know you guys have been sort of, not to use an agriculture term, but organic in the way you've sort of grown up over the years and you sort of have your own rise as your sort of framework. But have you ever looked at doing other certifications and frameworks? Have you sought advice on that? What is how does Intel approach that?
Yeah, we don't think that we're the experts in this. I mean,
Okay.
yes, you're right. We have led the way in a number of spaces because we started thinking about this, I think, earlier than some of our contemporaries. But where and when possible, we absolutely adopt global
Mm.
standards, right? I mentioned the UN's standards. We're ISO certified on a number of spaces, right? Because
Nice.
we think that the more we can get into a certification space that everyone can adopt, the better it is for the entire industry. So yes, in places where there hasn't been a global standard or a measurement capability and we've built our own, we will use that and help build then one the entire
Yeah.
industry to get behind. But it's not something that we're trying to keep proprietary. This isn't
Yeah.
something we look at as a trade secret. This is something that we think is required candidly
Yeah.
across the industry. And if we can help lead the way, then we're happy to go do that.
That's very cool. And what challenges have you faced? Any challenges, I guess, in rolling this out, operationalizing it? I mean, it sounds like you've had some really good champions, which is culturally, that rallies people, gets people out of bed kind of thing. But I would imagine you also have lots of many generations in a workforce. So there's maybe some pushback, some different paradigms, approaches to the world. Yeah, what are some challenges you've had or pushback that you've sort of experienced internally?
I think it's probably the same as anytime you're trying to disrupt
Yeah.
something, right? I don't it doesn't feel unique, candidly, in terms of the types of challenges that come up with this. Anytime you're trying to change the way a company thinks, I mean, we're a 50-plus-year-old company, right?
Yeah.
We've been in this industry for a really long time. But what I'm really proud of our company for is because we tend to be on the forefront of technology, we adopt things quicker.
Mm.
And we can get people on board with it. We've got a really scientifically based mindset. So if you
Yes.
could prove that there's some really good, really strong goodness in a new idea, tend to get behind it.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to go change processes. We want to change compensation, right? Like, those are
Yeah.
big deals, and that definitely gets some pushback at times.
Yeah.
But when you're in a company that embraces the new and intentionally
Mhm.
tries to disrupt itself, it tends to be a little bit easier, candidly.
Yep. And probably like you said, that agile or adaptability quotient, probably, given that you've ventured into the world of the unknown many times before, and it wouldn't be the first time or the last time. So,
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
um, yeah, can you tell me, I guess from my perspective, with this tech week, what we're what we get to have is people like yourself kind of share that knowledge. Is there anything that you would advise, recommend to, say, a smaller company or one just getting started on the journey, or to CEOs or founders? I know we've got it kind of the find your champions.
Mhm.
But yeah, and the other thing I want to sort of ask about is like, how do you, obviously there's things like this, but do you share, is this forefront in your marketing at all, around what you do? Is it the thing that drives the sales? It sounds like it's a nice to have sort of thing that comes alongside, or
Um, it's shifting, candidly, in terms of where is it in our marketing. I'm really quite excited to say that most of our customers ask for this,
cool.
right? I haven't talked to a single customer in the last couple of years that haven't asked me what we're doing
Mm.
um, on sustainability and how we're building our products for a couple of reasons. One, they all have to report it to their boards now too.
Yes.
It is on the forefront of most people's minds. It's in most people's annual reports if they're a public
Yeah.
company. The other piece is if I look at data centers, power consumption in a data center is one of the most costly things about running a data center.
Yeah, that's right.
So the more we can build products that are better performance per watt, per,
Mm.
dollar spent on power, the better it is for their business as well, because that reduces their, not only their footprint, but their operating structure, their cost structure. So all of the data
Mm.
center companies, anybody running enterprise class servers are really interested in that. I mean, Microsoft, I think, has even told me that they can see cost reductions of 5 to 15% for every performance, or without, excuse me, without impacting performance if we can reduce the power consumption.
Wow.
So, I
That's
mean, that's huge, right? 5 to
that.
15% off a multi-billion-dollar power bill is huge.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, every single one of my customers talks to me about this.
Cool.
And because the world, I think, is paying a lot more attention and, younger generations make this a requirement, both from a
Yeah.
company that they work for as well as products that they buy, it's
Hmm.
changing the sales conversation without question,
That's
without question.
cool. So yeah, they kind of advice to uh, the smaller companies. One thing that you've learned along the way, or yeah.
Yeah, I would start with just measure, right? Before you even put any goals, understand your starting point.
Mhm.
Because as soon as you understand where it is, one, it's not going to seem as daunting because you're
Yeah.
probably not as bad off as you think,
Yeah.
right? So that I would start with the optimistic side of this. And then I'd go pick 2 or 3 things. Don't go solve for everything at first.
Like also X, Y through Z. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, it's like staring at the elephant and trying to eat the whole thing
Yeah.
versus, how do we take off bites of this very sizable industry-wide problem, right? None of us can solve this on our own. We have to
Yeah.
solve it together. So go find the 2 or 3 things that really matter. I mean, it could be as easy as, you implement a different printing mechanism in your office so you're not using as much paper.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is going to make a difference, right?
Mhm.
So grab those 2 or 3 things, measure your progress, celebrate your wins, and then you can start taking on more and more over time.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I would say is push your suppliers,
Mm.
right? What are your suppliers doing? Because your scope 1 and 2 and like all of the scopes, regardless of where they sit, you've got to have the whole supply chain
Yeah.
involved.
Sorted. Mm.
So the more we are pushing our suppliers and our vendors to build the right solutions, then the more we can then adopt those too within our own environments.
I was going to say they can probably just have a chat to you guys and build and leverage your metrics and
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
We've
good.
spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess lastly, but not leastly at all, is the kind of where are you going? Because if you're kind of the big, we've done this, we've been doing it forever. The vision that you guys can bring to the industry as a whole, kind of what do you see as possible? I know you've got your 2024, but can you fill that out and color that picture in a little bit as to what that will mean for startups like mine or the rest of the industry? What does that mean for what we can do and how that changes the technology space as we fundamentally know it?
Sure. So we have committed to, from a product perspective, a 10x performance increase, performance per watt. So like that should change how all of us use computers, right? Whether you're
Yeah.
running on a laptop, that should give you dramatically better battery life. Whether you're running in a data center and how much, that performance is costing you from an energy perspective, all of that will make a really big difference from a product side of things.
No kidding.
The other thing that we're doing on the product side is we've invested really heavily on software that can do real-time optimizations. So if your computer is in standby mode, you don't want it running at full capacity, right? You don't want it running hard and hot. You want it to, slow down, running more efficiently. We've worked across the ecosystem to go change those standards so that that PC truly can reduce idle power consumption. Same thing in the data center side, right? As you change states and as you use, different server requirements, that can change too. And then on the kind of the manufacturing and our footprint in that space, not only have we committed to net zero carbon, we've committed to giving back and saving 700 million gallons of water per year. So we've already, in 2020, I think the number was like 1.7 billion gallons that we were able to save. That number will continue to grow over time. It also goes back to, what are we doing from renewable energy? We've committed to 100% renewable energy across all of our operations. So our factories are actually a little bit easier because we have the space, right? Like you have a land footprint that you can put in solar panels and wind turbines and those types of things. We've got office space around the globe, and we're committed to using renewable energy sources in all of those as well.
That's amazing. And this maybe or maybe not appropriate. But what's a way that a company can become part of a consortium or be part of your journey or contribute to this mission? Is there? I know you've mentioned that you do a lot kind of for the community or the ecosystem or the sector. Yeah, maybe talk to me a little bit about some of those opportunities that companies in New Zealand might be able to get amongst.
Absolutely. So I've got a whole team that covers Australia, New Zealand. Reach out to any of them. You can reach out to me directly. We can get you in touch with our experts. As much as I love this and I'm passionate about it, I'm not the expert. So what I would love to do is anybody that's really interested in this specifically and wants to learn from us, I'm happy to connect them to the folks that drive this on a daily basis.
Cool. Well, that's very cool and super generous of you. And yeah, the leadership is obvious and the commitment is very clear. So yeah, thank you for taking the time and for shedding light on what you guys do and the commitment that you have. It's inspiring. I got chills a few moments through that time. And thank you again, even just for all the work and the impact that you're making globally. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, Melissa. It's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. We have a long way to go, but I feel like
yeah,
we're on the right path.
cool. Thank you.
Thank you.